At that time, the best weapons we had were the Kalashnikov and the RPG-7. We only used these two types of weapons. But later, we used 82mm mortars. The Russians used against us the most modern weapons, good aircraft, and a trained, powerful army.
The threat of a Russian victory led the United States finally to send the Mujahideen a replacement for the ineffective SAM. They chose the Stinger, and its success against the Soviet gunships transformed the war and hastened its end.
اینجا اگجوی است کلش منکاری پیش مسجد منکاری اینی خانقاه منکاری درست اینجا منکاری خدا جور کرد نه.
By 1986, Massoud was strong enough to mount an attack on a communist government fort at Farhar in the north. We watched his guerrillas take the fort on the second day, capturing most of the garrison.
Gradually, the strength of the Mujahideen, the independence groups in Afghanistan, helped by the Americans and the British, and the Pakistanis particularly, made life so difficult for the Russians that they eventually had to withdraw.
In 1989, after 10 frustrating, demoralizing years, President Gorbachev pulled the Red Army out of Afghanistan. Massoud and his fellow Mujahideen had punctured the myth of its invincibility.
I would argue that the first crack in the Berlin Wall happened in Afghanistan.
The outside world soon lost interest. As far as it was concerned, the war was over and the Afghans had won, but at a terrible cost. Out of an estimated population of 15 million before the war, about 1 million had been killed, and as many again wounded. Of the wounded, the majority were the victims of anti-personnel mines, scattered indiscriminately by the Russians from helicopters and aircraft, and laid with deadly precision round their camps and bases.
In Afghanistan, the statistics we have are not exact, but it's estimated 14 million mines were laid in different areas by the Russians. The majority of mines are anti-personnel. Many of the victims were women and children, blown up when gathering firewood or herding the family sheep and goats.
The Soviets did drop mines all over the Panjshir Valley and all over the places that they couldn't control. And a lot of them were little plastic mines disguised as toys that a child would pick up and blow his hand off, and that defeated mine detectors.
Mine injuries are particularly unpleasant because basically the mines are designed to be either anti-personnel or anti-tank or anti-vehicle. Either way, when they blow up, they cause huge damage to any person in the vicinity.
Nobody to this day knows whether there are 2 million or 10 million mines in Afghanistan. It's just not knowable. Great areas have been cleared, but that is the legacy first of the Russians. It was repeated by war after that. But it was one of the most shameful legacies for those mines that blew apart children who were working in the fields.
The reason why they cause such devastating injuries is they involve both soft tissues and bone, and frequently it's even with the most sophisticated modern techniques impossible to reconstruct the limb following a mine injury. And so amputation is the only answer.
The Afghans are great survivors. For 10 years, from 1979 to 1989, the Russians waged a hugely destructive war against them, but lost. The Mujahideen then fought a 3-year war of attrition against the puppet government of President Najibullah, ending in Massoud's triumphant capture of Kabul in 1992. Peace beckoned, the future looked rosy.
The United States and the West became disinterested in Afghanistan. And that was the beginning of a tragedy for the country as well as for the region and the world.
Tragically, the victors turned on one another in a vicious civil war that tore what little remained of the country to shreds. This is when the West should have intervened to give its support. It failed to do so. Out of the turmoil came the Taliban. And although unrecognized by the United Nations, ruled most of the country except the northeast, where Massoud was still holding out.
When they started to establish themselves in Kandahar, they were very popular because the people were so fed up with the lack of law and order and the banditry that they welcomed these new people who would get things really sorted out. And the Taliban were incredibly successful. They were supported by the Pakistanis, but they conquered Kandahar, they moved right, they took Kabul, they pushed the Northern Alliance, Massoud and his group, right up into the northeast of the country.
We supported the Taliban in Kandahar. The order came from the government to help Mullah Naqib. We even sent jet planes to bomb the area controlled by Gulbuddin Hekmatyar in Ghazni, where they fought against them, until the Taliban arrived at the gates of Kabul.
They ran the country successfully, but, of course, the people who'd welcomed them didn't realize until later how extreme they were.
Afghanistan is famous for its hospitality and good manners, and you really felt it was the antithesis of that. They didn't want you there. I mean, this is not true of all Taliban, of course, but there was a very hostile feeling in a lot of places.
The Taliban period was the worst time in Afghanistan's history. The crimes they have committed, the history of Afghanistan will never forget. Women did not have the right to work. They had to stay at home. Beards were compulsory for men. Men were not allowed to wear anything other than traditional clothes. People were forced to go to mosque or beaten by whips and sticks. Music was not allowed. Cutting hands off and executing people in public was normal for that period.
And the other trouble was the Taliban had allowed